PJS Publications, publisher of Crafts Magazine, presents the Crafts Video How-To Library. Step-by-step craft how-tos on video cassette. Now here's Ken Brown's Old English Calligraphy to help you master the art of beautiful decorative writing.
Have you ever said to yourself, gee, I would love to learn calligraphy, but I don't have any talent and there's no way I could? Well, I'm here to dispel that myth and prove to you that you can learn calligraphy. I'm Ken Brown and I'm self-taught and probably the best example of someone non-artistic who learned the skill and has made it work. You can too. Look at the ways you can use calligraphy. Just a simple little place card for a banquet or a dinner. You can do name cards, you can do envelopes. How about a special little invitation or something in the mail to someone? How about a place card, not a place card, but a name badge. I'll bet you've had a lot of opportunities to do name badges for people. Birthday cards. I get a lot of fun out of doing birthday cards where here's an example of one that you then open up and it has the message inside. Very simple, easy to do, and it takes no special skill after you learn the technique and the method. Here's just another little self-mailer. There are a lot of different styles of calligraphy. This happens to be one in cursive. We're going to do Old English today and show you many techniques and methods that will help you along the way. Here's an envelope, another treatment with a big special first letter. You can do lettering on ribbon. I've done a lot of interesting pieces of work just on ribbon and fabric. You have to be sure that the particular fabric or ribbon will take the ink, but a lot of them will. I've done work on wood. This is a lot of fun. You can take interesting wood shapes, cut them out, letter on the front and the back. I've used them for mailing pieces, for promotional items, lots and lots of fun. Take parchment paper. You can letter special little messages to hang on the wall, to be framed, to give away as gifts. There are just an endless number of ways you can use your skill once you master it. Here's another example of a little plaque that I did. Now this is done on white paper and then actually decoupaged on a little plaque. And then a fancier version where I've taken just one word, lettered it in Old English, and then we've come back in. My wife does the artwork. She comes back in with watercolors and dresses it up a little bit and makes it really a beautiful finished piece. And then one more idea that I have a lot of fun with, it's a birthday card. It reads Happy Birthday this way, and then if you turn it this way, it has the name on it. And this is the style of lettering that we're going to learn today. It's an Old English, Gothic, black letter, all those words interchange, but it's a more formal style of lettering that's no more difficult to do than any other. First of all, let's get started and let me show you the pens. There are a number of different kinds of pens that you can use for calligraphy, and of course in order to do calligraphy you have to have a chisel edge pen of some sort, one that has a wide knife-like edge on the very end. Now this is a dip pen. I'm going to go over here and just show you after I've dipped it into the ink, all I have to do is to put it on the paper and it makes a nice sharp crisp line that's not difficult to use at all. This is a steel brush, and it too is a dip pen. You dip it into the ink, make a couple of little priming marks on the paper, and then go right to your project once you have your ink loaded. Again, it holds the ink, and you make your strokes, and you get good, bold, nice letters. They're beautiful for doing posters, banners, or something where you need a lot of width and size on your letters. Here's an interesting pen. It's a split kind of a pen. I'm going to dip it into the ink slightly and load it up and then go over to the board. And I don't do anything different with this pen. The fact that it has two notches in the point is what gives the open shadow effect in the middle. See, I'm using the same strokes, not doing anything differently, but it gives you such a neat effect. A lot of you may be toll painters or decorative artists of some sort and scared to death of the pen. Well, the brush that you're familiar with in your paint work, if you use a flat brush, can also be used for calligraphy. I'm using ink. You may want to use paint in whatever you do, but you just load it up with your ink or paint and then come right to your board, and once you understand the strokes that we're going to talk about later, there's nothing to it. It's a piece of cake to use a brush just as much as it is a pen. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this because it's kind of slow, but if you get desperate, you can actually use a tongue depressor. This is nothing more than a stick that I've used to letter this word right up here. I dipped it into the ink, and it works fine. Another time, in desperation, I was going to do a special little project in concrete. I used a screwdriver. It has a wide chisel point on it. I went to the wet concrete and lettered the message, and it just worked beautifully. Okay, the markers are a kind of pen that you may be familiar with. It's a felt type tip, it's chisel edge on the end, and they're just absolutely great for doing calligraphy. Fast and easy. You don't need any worries about dipping it in the ink. All you have to do is uncap it and go. They come in a variety of widths. They're simple, clean. Kids use them. In fact, it's the best way to get kids started is with the marker because you don't have the mess to contend with. The scroll marker is a pen that has a little notch taken right out of the end of it. Don't know if you can see that or not, but it has just a slight little notch. And then when you make your strokes with it, it gives you the opening in the middle just like the dip pen did, but you get two lines of equal weight. And again, you do nothing differently. All you do is hold the pen exactly as you would a normal pen, and the scroll split point gives you the effect. Here's the pen that I use probably more than anything else for doing work for reproduction or whatever. It's a fountain pen. It's just a reservoir pen that has a wide chisel point, and it has a reservoir, has a little bladder inside where all you do is fill it up, and then it'll write for a long time. You don't have to worry about dipping. The ink is blacker, it's permanent, works wonderfully well. When you're through with it, stick it in your shirt pocket in your purse, carry it with you, use it whenever you have the opportunity or the urge. Another pen is called a shadow pen, and it too is like the reservoir pen that I just showed you, but it has a little notch right out of the side of the pen, and this one gives you one thick stroke and one thin stroke. Isn't that neat? It dresses up your work and gives it an extra dimension so quickly, and again, you don't do anything special. The pen does the work. All right, the last pen that I'm going to show you is really a marker. It's a giant wide marker that I discovered not long ago when I had the need to do a great big banner for a promotional thing that I was doing. So I discovered this marker, and I just absolutely love it. As you can see, it too is a chisel edge, and all I have to do is just lay it down at the 45-degree angle that I'm going to share with you in just a minute. And it makes these big, bold, dramatic letters that are wonderful. I mean, you can take a piece of butcher paper or a big piece of wrapping paper and do letters this tall, 30, 40, 50 feet wide. It's really great fun. Okay, we need to get started. I want to show you 4 simple rules that if you'll remember each and every time you do your calligraphy, it's going to be easy. And that's what I keep telling you. It is easy, and I don't want you to become discouraged because it's an acquired skill. If you'll remember these 4 rules, practice them and do them every time you begin your work and every time you do your practice, it's not going to be difficult at all. All right, rule 1 has to do with pen angle. You have to hold your pen at a 45-degree angle all the time. Now the way you do that is merely make an L. Just take your pen and make a big L on your sheet and split that angle, just visually split it, and then take the pen and roll it in your hand until your pen point lines up with that 45-degree angle. Now that is very important. That's a constant that never ever changes. That 45-degree angle is what gives you the varying thicks and thins. So your letters, the shape of your letters is a function of where you are in the stroke. When you're coming down, it's thin. When you're going the other direction, it gets thick. So remember to keep that pen point at a 45-degree angle all the time. Never change it. These letters are formed by that angle, not by varying pressure and not by rolling the pen. Once you find it, then that's a constant that you hold on to. Rule 2 has to do with how you hold the pen in your hand. A lot of people have the mistaken idea that you hold the calligraphy pen just as you would any other pen, but you really don't. You have to hold the pen in a very vertical attitude, keeping it on this section of your index finger instead of back here. This is what you should not do. Hold it vertically so that when you line up on your 45-degree line, that means that you can keep just the very knife edge, just the very leading edge of that pen point on the paper, because that's because your pen is vertical. If you're holding it back like this, then you're going to tend to get only the point touching. So keep your pen in a vertical attitude, third section of your index finger. It's a little bit different, and you'll feel maybe a little strange in the beginning, but you have to sort of mentally shift gears. When you do calligraphy, you're using a different kind of pen and a different kind of technique altogether. It really isn't like handwriting because you're forming letters in bits and pieces, therefore you have to do things differently. The third rule has to do with the little finger. This is probably the most difficult thing for people to get in the habit of doing, but it is so important. When I pick up my pen, I automatically assume this position. I let the little finger rest on my ring finger. The first joint of my little finger rests on the first joint of my ring finger. That is for extra stability. When I'm doing these letters, if you'll notice, only my thumb, index, and middle finger are actually doing the motion. My hand is locked on the table. Now with my little finger out that way, I have total control. I can make these letters just as slowly as I want to and make all the strokes join up and match and be just exactly like I want. So the little finger is very important. It's going to feel awkward, it's going to feel strange, it's going to feel cramped, but if you'll make a habit every time you do calligraphy, let that little finger come out, I promise you your work is going to be steadier and you're going to be happier with it. Rule 4 has to do with stroke direction. Now, calligraphy pens are flexible, especially the steel-pointed pens or the dip-type pens, where if you push them upward, you're going to make a mess. So strokes must go down and to the right only. You can't push the pen up because you're going to tend to make it jump. You can't push the pen to the left because it just doesn't want to go that way. It's flexible. It's designed to be pulled down and to the right. So this will make more sense to you later when we begin doing letters. You'll see that the letters are formed in pieces, and you never write the letters. You actually form the little puzzles, put the puzzle pieces together like this by having your strokes always go either down or to the right, and it's more like drawing than it is handwriting. Okay, left-handers, we can't forget you. There's always a batch of southpaws out there, and they get overlooked a lot of the time, so we're not going to do that. If you're a left-hander, you have to have your hand position exactly the same as a right-hander. In other words, if you stand behind a right and a left-hander, the positions would almost be mirror images. The right-hander's pen goes to the right, the left-hander's pen is pointing to the left away from the body. Okay, in the markers and pens that aren't designed specifically for left-handers, you're going to have to, when you line up on your 45-degree angle, you're going to have to turn your pen to line up on that 45 degrees, but look where the pen's pointing. It's pointing toward me instead of away from me. So you have to lean the pen here instead of out here to compensate for that. Well, if you are going to really get serious with your calligraphy, which I trust you will, you need to go to the store and pick up a pen designed for left-handers. And what happens is, they design the left-handed pen, if you can see the one on the left, has a slight bend, not a bend, but it's notched to the left a little bit. This one has a straight edge on it. This one it goes down to the left just a little bit. Well, the reason for that is that you want to be able to not have to hold the pen over toward you. You want to be able for it to lean away from you, and with that cut at an oblique angle, it allows you to assume the proper position. So left-handers, get you a left-handed pen. When you go to the store, specify that you are a southpaw, because if you don't, the clerk won't know, and they'll just give you a right-handed set, and it won't be as easy for you to use. All right, I want to show you how these strokes for Old English evolve. There are only 14 strokes that go to make up this whole alphabet, and I want to illustrate how they came about. When I started to do this alphabet, I'd been doing it for a long time without really stopping to think about what I did. So I decided to break the letters down, and I said, all right, the way I make a lowercase a is like that. So I put that up there and I said, okay, that is stroke 1. So the next thing I do to make an A in the Old English style is that stroke right there. So I came across and I named that 2. Okay, the third part of the Old English character looks like this to finish that A. So I put that up there and I said, okay, I have a stroke 3 now. So it takes those 3 elements to make this lowercase character. Okay, when I make the B, it takes a stroke like that, so I put that up there, and I said, okay, that's the first thing I do to make a B, so we'll call that number 4. To finish the B, I come across like this and down, and let those join, remembering now that the pen is always at a 45-degree angle, so the skinny part joins with the skinny part from the first and second stroke, or the fourth and fifth in this case. All right, the C started off like this, and I discovered that it began exactly like the A. The C starts exactly like the A does. So I didn't have to add a stroke up here, but I have to finish it. Okay, so I did that. Well, I forgot to put the other stroke for the B up there, so let's do that. Let's put stroke 5 up there, which looks like that, and then we'll go to the C, where I did not have to add a stroke until I got to the top, and then I put that up there, and I said, okay, that is a stroke 6. Okay. When I made the D, I made another interesting discovery. Stroke 1 again, exactly the same thing. The next part of the D comes down like this and over, and I'm going to change it just a little bit. I didn't make this motion up as I did on the 4 on the B, but it's still a stroke 4, so I'm not going to add anything. All right, I still have a little gap right here, so I'm going to use that stroke and just merely bridge that gap, and then I have a completed D. So what makes up a D? All right, it's a stroke 1, 4, and 6. Okay, I'm going to make one more letter, lest you think I take you through the whole alphabet this way. I found out that the C starts exactly like the A. I mean the E starts like the A. It can be confusing. All right, so I didn't have to add one, but I'm going to come back over here now and finish it like this. And I find that I can use this stroke, which is the very same that I used on the B, to complete the E. I just made it a little bit shorter. Okay, so an E is a 1 and a 5. Well, after I went through all that, I discovered that by the time I got all the way down to Z, I had only used 14 strokes. And here they are. These 14 different strokes, as simple as they are, make up all 26 letters. Now, they have to be done in the right sequence and in the right order, but it only takes the combination of these 14 pieces to make all of this. So it is extremely easy when broken down into its common forms. If you look at Old English, or if you look at any style calligraphy, it might be intimidating to you because you think, well, again, there are too many elements, it takes too much skill, but it doesn't. If you remember those 14 strokes and learn them through practice, then it's just a matter of putting them together. How do you get the letter size? How do you determine how tall to make the letters? Well, here's the way you do it. You draw a light guideline across the bottom. I have a light pencil line there. And then you take your pen and stand it up vertically. This is one time when you don't use the 45, but you make it stand vertically and make 5 little checkerboards just like this. And then you draw a line right across the top with your straight edge, of course, and then that gives you the height of your lowercase letter. Now, it doesn't matter what pen you're using. If you're using a little bitty pen or a giant pen, you still go through the 5 checkerboard motions to establish the height of that letter. Now, if you have a lot of space and wanted to make your letters a little bit larger, then there's nothing that says you can't make an A maybe 7 pen widths tall. And on the other side of that coin, you can even come down and make them much, much smaller. You could make that letter, or any letter, maybe 3 pen widths high. But you can see what happens. It starts getting very dense and very closed in. And if you took something that you had done this size to the printer for reproduction, then it's going to begin to fill up as it's reduced. And usually when you do work for reproduction, you do it larger and then the printer shrinks it down. So if you do them real small, like 3 pen widths, it's going to fill in and not be very attractive. Guidelines. Okay, if you're doing a piece of work and now that you know your pen is 5 pen widths high, your letters are 5 pen widths high, then If you'll do yourself a little template like this, it's very easy to do. All you do is figure out the size. I've chosen 4 different pins here, extra broad, broad, medium, and fine. And I've done the 5 little checkerboard pieces. I've done the letter. And then I've allowed 9 pin widths in between the bottom of the letter and the top of the next line. This allows for the tails of the G's and the Y's not to get confused with the tops of the H's and the L's and so forth. So you can vary this. You can make it 8 or 9 and then shorten the ascenders and descenders a little bit. Once you get this dimension and this dimension, then all you have to do is just come down and repeat it right on down each time, and then do the same thing for the next pin and the next and the next. And then when you have a piece of work to do, you lay this by the side of your work and select the pin that you're going to use and merely project those lines over onto your worksheet, and that allows you to very quickly transfer the proper height and the proper space between lines over to your work, and then you'll have your guidelines. Now there's another little template that's available that you can get in your store, or if you can't find it locally, then write to me and I can provide it for you. It has all the pin widths already figured out on the side. You just pick your pin width that you want, merely lay it down, and then transfer these dimensions over to the side. Again, it's very quick and easy, saves lots of time. Okay, now that we have the elementaries out of the way, let's develop some of these letters, and you'll see me as I go through actually forming these letters piece by piece. You'll see really how easy it is to put the puzzle pieces. In this case, we're going to do the Old English lowercase. You'll find how easy it is to put 14 pieces together to make A to Z. So let's get started. All right, on the A, it takes 3 different strokes. There's 1, 2, 3. All right, on the B, it takes this one, a stroke 4, and a 5. Now notice when I get to right here, I'm going to lift that pen to make this stroke end where this stroke ended, and I'll have the skinniest portion right there. And that's what gives you, or what gives calligraphy its inherent beauty, is the thicks and thins that are in the right places. Okay, a C is made up of another stroke 1, and then that stroke 6. I started this stroke 6 right at the beginning of stroke 1, and then I just went the other direction. Okay, here's the D. It starts off the very same way as the A. Then I come across, down, pick up the tail end of that stroke, and then I come right across and fill the little gap. An E. Once you've done a batch of these A's, D's, and E's, they really become easy because they all start the same way. There's stroke 1, here's stroke 5, and then you have the completed letter. Okay, let's move over to the F. The F is made up of actually 4 different strokes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it starts off skinny at the top, 45-degree angle, comes straight down, you have the width, the wide part of the pen producing, and then you lift. Now I want you to notice right here, as I make this stroke, and I'll make it again, watch how I lift the pen quickly to make it skinny on the end, and look where the pen stops. It stops way out here in midair. There must be an inch from here to where I stop. That's to give the trailing edge of that pen point the ability to make a real skinny tail. And then I just add those 2 strokes and the crossbar, and I have an F. Okay, the G starts off just like the A and the C and the D. See, I could from that point make a variety of letters, but I'm making a G. I'm going to come straight across, lift my pen. Don't come across and lift at the same time. Bring your stroke across, stop, and then lift. Then you come straight down, lift your pen quickly, and then you come over here and join this stroke on the bottom, stroke 8, and again you have that nice thin ending right there, and that is what you want. This should be the thinnest part of your letter, as is here and here. Okay, here's an H. A stroke 10, like that, and then I'm going to lay my pen just below where this top guideline is, and I'm going to come up, down, straight down, and then put that little bend on it. Now keep in mind my little finger is out and I'm forming most of these letters with my hand locked on the paper. It's really not going anywhere. All the motion is between my thumb, index, and middle finger. And that's what you want. That's how you get the control, is letting your thumb, index, and middle finger do all the action. Look underneath and see my little finger. You can see how it's locked on the table. That gives me the maximum control, because if you looked under there you can't see any daylight. That's because I want all the control to be right here. All right, then I'm going to put a little dot on the top of the I. Now let's do the J. The J starts off with that little motion. I'm coming down at a 45-degree angle, not to be confused with the pen angle, which is like that. I come down and then come straight down, and I lift my pen quickly, and then I come back over and lay in stroke 8. Okay, on the K, straight down. Now notice, here's the guideline. I've got a light pencil guideline on there where I can come back and erase it later. Just before I get to that bottom guideline, I'm going to change directions a little bit and put that little angled foot right on the bottom, and then I'll come right around like this, make that stroke, and then I'll come over with stroke 12 to complete the K. All right, the L is nothing more than exactly the same first stroke that you just did on the K. Same thing. That's what makes this so easy, because all the strokes are interchangeable. When I do the M, it takes a stroke 13, like that, and then 2 stroke 11s. Comes over, straight down. Just before I get to the guideline, I change directions. Stroke 11 again, down. Just before I get to the guideline, I change directions. Okay, then the N is really half, or I should say 2/3 of an M. It's the same thing. You come down and bend, and then you come over with a stroke 11, and you stop. You can see the N and the M right here. It's exactly the same. Again, at the risk of repeating myself, I have to remind you that these strokes are common. They're used time and time again. If you can master the pen position and get those strokes flowing for you properly, then it's just the matter of putting them together. This is what you should be referring to. Might be a good idea to check after you've looked at your tape several times. Make a note of where your counter is. Zero your counter at the beginning of the tape, and then if there's something that you're having difficulty with, you can go back and find out where that particular thing is on the tape, and it'll help you bail out much quicker. All right, the O is made up of 2 strokes, a stroke 1 and a stroke 5. 2 elements that make the O. Old English P comes down like this. I lift my pen quickly, then I come right over here and make them join. Now, let me show you that again. I'm going to come down, lift the pen quickly. Now, you have to know where to begin this stroke right here so it'll match up right. If you'll look over here, just start that stroke over here about level with where this one ended, and then put a little hump on it, and then it'll join up just right. And then come back up, down, over, let that stroke end like that, and then you bring stroke 8 right into it, and you've got your finished P. Okay, the Q is another one that starts off with stroke 1, like the A and the C and the E. You come over, lift your pen, come just inside that stroke 2, and come straight down, come over and up, and then let this stroke start like this, number 5, come down, straighten it out, and then join it. And where they touch should be super thin right there. Okay, the R takes a stroke 13 and a 6. Then I'm going to start this second stroke just down below the top of the letter, just below that bend, and come up with the skinny portion and then over. Now remember, if it means that you need to check yourself every once in a while, remember to keep that pen point at a 45-degree angle. And if you have to just make your little L and split it, line it up again, then do that, because it's vitally important that that pen angle never ever change. Okay, let's do the S. The lowercase Old English S is made up of 3 different strokes, a 14 and a 6 and an 8. I'm going to lay my pen right here at the top of that top guideline. Going to start skinning, and then I'm going to turn the corner and come right down and then lift my pen quickly so I get a nice skinny ending right there. Then I'll lay the pen on the guideline, come right over there with an 8 and then with a 6. Now here's something to watch for on the S. If you make that middle stroke too vertical like this and then you finish it, what happens? It looks like it's falling to the right. So be sure that this is about at this angle, about a 45-degree angle all the time. Okay, on the T, you make the T with a stroke 10, which is nothing more than a lowercase l. You lift your pen and then come right back up here to the top guideline and just put a straight bar right through it. And then you have your T. A U is 2 stroke 13s with one little difference. On this one, I'm going to put this extra little mark right here so that it will join up with this 13. But when I finish that one, I'm not going to do that extra mark. Now I can make that if I want to, and there's nothing wrong with that. And here's the point that I should remind you of something else. Think about what I'm showing you here as like I'm sharing a recipe that you might use to make a cake or a pie. I'm giving you the ingredients, but when you make your own pie, you may want to put a little bit more butter in or a little bit more of this or that to suit your own taste. Same thing works with the calligraphy. I'm going to show you a learning alphabet that's basic and standard. How you treat it after you learn it is up to you, and that's what makes it fun. Go in and see how you can adapt it, how you can make it your own, and it really will become your own. All right, let's go back and make a V now. A V starts out with a stroke 12, comes down like this, and then a stroke 5. Straight down, and then I'm going to turn the corner and lift my pen quickly, and that'll join to where the thinnest part is right where it joins at the bottom. Okay, W. A W is made up of 2 different strokes, but there are 3 altogether. It takes a 13 and a 13. And again, notice when I make this portion right here, I'll lift my pen quickly, and it actually stops in midair right here. So you try that also. When you make this stroke, lift your pen and see if it stops up in midair. Okay, then this stroke, 5, changed up a little bit from where we used it before, comes down, joins skinny. An X is made up of that nice smooth stroke right there. And then I'm going to take a 6 at my 45-degree angle. If I go straight up at that 45, I'm going to get a super skinny line. And then I just make a little dip in it, and then just do the reverse of that down here at the bottom with the 8. And I have an X. Y. Then I'm going to put that little mark right there on it so that I can make this stroke touch it. This is something that you learn only through practice and doing. You may make this stroke here, and then you'll come over and you may miss it when you connect, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Until you get the feel of it, you may do it like this, and then you may start this stroke over too far, and you won't be able to connect them together. So just bear in mind that if you kick that little serif up, that little ending skinny part right there, then that will give you a guide as to where to bring that stroke down so that they'll just barely touch right here. The last letter on the lowercase is the Z. I'm going to make 3 strokes work for me. There's a 2 and a 5, which is really just a straight line at that 45-degree angle of your pen. It makes almost a totally skinny line, and then a stroke 8. And there you have the whole lowercase alphabet. It really is easy. You have to try it to believe it. All right, let's look at the uppercase. If you can do the lowercase, you got to do the capitals. So, when I broke this alphabet down in the way that I did Old English over a period of time, my particular alphabet evolved. And then when I analyzed it, I found that I could use only 13 strokes. I needed only these 13 different pieces to make up the entire uppercase alphabet of Old English. Now, let's spend a second on this, and let me show you something that's interesting about this alphabet that I think will take a lot of the fear out of it for you. If you look at these letters and analyze one thing this stroke 3 right here appears in every letter except one. Stroke 3 is actually two different strokes. Right here, it takes this motion, and then there's one other little motion in together into the side that gives you stroke 3. It appears in every letter except the S. It does not appear in the S, but every other character has stroke 3. So if you can visualize any of these letters without the stroke 3, it really is just a simple cursive letter that has been stood up. So keep that in mind as you do these things, and you'll see what I'm talking about, that stroke 3 is really what gives Old English its beautiful look. I'm going to show you a triangle here that you need to get or make yourself a little vertical aid of some sort to draw guidelines. What this is for is to put on your T-square or your guide at the bottom or whatever you have so that you can move it along and with a light pencil line draw vertical lines to keep your letters going properly straight up and down. So that's a tool that you really need to get a hold of. You'll use it in a lot of different ways. All right, the Old English, even though in the uppercase, even though they look more complicated, they have fewer strokes. There are only 13, but there are more of them per letter. So let's get started and let me show you how they go together. Now, you do have a choice in making these characters in that sometimes you can make the strokes out of order from what I'm doing. Basically, you need to go from left to right and form them across the page. But an A takes all of these strokes right here. It takes a 1 and a 3. There's that 3 that I just mentioned, that common 3 stroke, a 2 and a 5 and a 4 and a 1. And when you put them all together in the right sequence, in the right place, you get a very formal Old English character. Okay, the B comes down. Again, I lift the pen real quickly right here to get the nice little skinny ending, and then I'm going to come across with a stroke 5, and then here I'm going to lay that old stroke 3 in, and then I'll come up with a 7, and you've already noticed that these have a different identity than the lowercase. They're different strokes. Even though they're formed the same, they have their own identity. All right, the C starts off just like this. Again, it starts at a 45, comes down, it gets thick, it comes up, I lift the pen quickly, it ends up at a skinny point right here, always at a 45-degree angle with a pinpoint. Then I lay in stroke 3, and then stroke 9, and I have the Old English C. Okay, let's make a D. Now I'm going to illustrate what I said a minute ago about that stroke 3 and how it really does make the letter. Now if I complete that D without the unit 3, without putting this piece in right here, it really looks very plain vanilla. It almost could be a cursive D that has just been stood up. Well, if I add stroke 3, which again is actually 2 strokes, then all of a sudden it snaps to attention and becomes an Old English uppercase D. Okay, let's do an E. Now as in the lowercase, these strokes are common. You use them over and over and over again. It's just the arrangement in which they appear that gives them the finished look, the finished character. Okay, let's do an F now. An F is very much like an E, and it's the only letter in the alphabet, as I've demonstrated here, that actually comes below that top or the bottom guideline. See, I've dropped it way down below that bottom guideline. And then I'm going to add stroke 3, and then I'll add stroke 9 to finish it off. Okay, here's a G. Now notice how similar the G is to the C. There's the 3. But now to complete the G, I'm going to lay my pen right here and come up with a 7, real skinny line, and then come around very slowly until they join, and then I'm going to stop. Now I'll repeat it again. Keep that little finger out. It allows you to make your motion very, very slowly and deliberately, and when you get to where you want to stop, you can. And then you put the finished top, the stroke 9 on the top, and you're all done. Here is an H. That common stroke 1. Over and over again we use it. There's a 6. And then I'm going to drop a little bit below the line for that. Add the 3. And then this stroke right here stops at that point, and then I'm going to come back and just add this. It's really not delineated as a separate stroke, but you just put that little foot on there and then come back up here and then add your stroke 1 in the middle and you have an H. Here is an I. Are you catching on now how often this stroke 1 is used? Most letters start with a stroke 1, and most letters, as we saw earlier, have the stroke 3. Okay, here's the I. Lift my pen quickly. I'm going to actually come below the line to give you a little variation. Over here in the example you can see that I've got it exactly between the bottom and top guidelines, but over here I've chosen to drop it down just a little bit, and you can do that. You can give it a little extra length if you want. Doesn't matter at all. Okay, here's a J. J starts off with that stroke 1. It comes straight across. Again, when you make these strokes that have the very abrupt ending, stop your pen and then lift it. Don't make your motion and stop at the same time. Come across, stop, and lift. Okay, you're going to come down, lift your pen quickly, bring stroke 5 over, and then put that ever so familiar stroke 3 in, and you have a J. Here's a K, one that I'm quite familiar with since I do it so often. Okay. Now I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than the example 2. I'll put stroke 7 in there. Now if I have the opportunity, if space allows, and I don't have any restrictions down in here or any conflicts, then instead of making this stroke 4 short like it is and ending up on the bottom of the guideline, on the bottom guideline, I'm going to bring it way down like this. And that gives a lot of visual interest. It allows you to add some flavor to your letter and a little bit of variety, and it's not hard to do. You just make a longer motion than is shown on the example and you've got it. Okay, there is the beginning of an L, and then I'm going to put a stroke 3 in, and then now I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than the example again to give you some variety. You can do it like that, or you can make the stroke 1 come across and then you don't touch it. You come straight down and you let stroke 9 come off of that, and then let stroke 3 come off of the stroke 1, and then put your finishing part on it like that. So that gives you a little bit of variety too. Okay, on the M, starts off the same, comes across, comes down, stroke 3, and 2 11s. And then I'm going to cross it in the middle. This is the same motion that we crossed the T with, the F on the lowercase. It's just a straight motion, goes right through the middle of that character. Okay, the N starts off with stroke 1, then I'm going to come right down those guidelines. I don't think you can see the lines, maybe you can very faintly, but I have guidelines going vertically, so I can come right straight down and keep everything uniform. It's really important to keep your letters uniform. If you've got some leaning to the left and some to the right and some straight up and down, your finished piece is not going to be very attractive. Okay, there's the finished N. Now, we're halfway through the uppercase alphabet, so let's keep going. The O looks like this. It starts off exactly like a C or a G. You make this stroke down and up, and then you come over here, leave that little opening at the top, you let those join, and then you come down with your stroke 3. P, straight, the bottom, stroke 7 comes around, and like this. Notice how my pen motion is. Notice how I lift it. That's something that I can't overemphasize the importance of, is how you, with your little finger out, you control your motions. You lift it quickly when you need to, and it really will add so much crispness to your letters. Okay, the R starts off like the P and like so many others. Here's the 3. And like the K, if I choose to and if I have the space, I can come down here with a long swash like that. Okay, here's the letter, the only one in the alphabet in this particular one that doesn't have stroke 3. The way you do this is to make 2 identical stroke 13s. There's one, and then come down just a little bit from the beginning of that and just repeat it. You're going to do the same thing and make them parallel. Then lift your pen quickly and then come back over here like this, let those join, and then let that join at the top, and you've got an S. Okay, here's the Old English T in this particular learning alphabet. Keep in mind that I'm showing you the nuts and bolts of one particular style, my style of Old English. You should take it, make it your own. Learn how to do it this way, but as you learn it, then go ahead and put your own personality into it. I'm getting pretty good at this stroke 3. I've done it so many times, and you will be too. Okay, a V has a straight line just like that, and then we have the 3 on the side. This time you've got to lean and do the stroke 3 at an angle, whereas you've been doing it straight up and down. This time you're going to be doing it sort of this way. Okay, then stroke 7 comes around just like that and joins at the bottom. The W. Straight across. Now I'm going to bring this stroke 11 straight out of number 1 and down. Just before I get to the bottom line, I'm going to turn my pen and kick it up. I need this little part right here so that the next stroke can touch it. As I come down, it touches it, almost. I'm going to fill it in just a little bit. And then I come down with a stroke 12, and I let them join. I'm in control. My little finger is out. I'm making that stroke slowly so I can make it match just where I want to. Okay, and then I'll do a 3. And X looks like this. Big stroke 9, and then I'm going to do a 3. Again, it follows, rather than being straight up and down like this one, it's leaning at the angle of this stroke of the X. And then I come back in with a 5, and if I want to, I can let that join right there. So you end up with a stroke 3 that actually blends into a 5. Okay, the Y. I'm going to start right across like this, and then come down, over and up. And then I'll come down, kick my pen up real briskly, lift it off the paper so that I can bring that 5 in and have my contrast. I want there to be a lot of contrast between the thickness here and the thinness of this trailing off of stroke 6. And then I'll come down like this with the stroke 3. And finally, the Z. Now, you've probably figured out, he said that he didn't move his hand because the little finger was on the board all the time. Well, it is, and I can do most letters and most strokes with my thumb, index, and middle finger. But it's obvious when you do a long stroke like this, you've got to move your whole hand, and then to come across and do a nice swash, my entire hand has to move, but the little finger is there as a guide. It keeps the pressure of the pen even so that I don't have to worry about a shaky stroke. If my little finger is out there, then it keeps me nice and steady, and I don't worry about the jiggle. Letter sizes. Once you figure out how to do the lowercase and the uppercase, then you've got to understand something about the contrast and how you match uppercase and lowercase together. Well, here's an example to show you that where I have an uppercase P and lowercase other letters to make up the words practice daily. And I use those 2 words for a purpose. Remember that. You should practice every day, and you will be doing this much quicker than you ever imagined. The lowercase letters are 5 pen widths high. The uppercase letters are an additional 3. So when you set up your guidelines, just set up your little checkerboard thing here, use a T-square or a straight edge, and draw your lines as a guide. Look quickly and see if you can tell me real quickly what this word says? Well, it's pretty obvious that it says calligraphy, but if you'll compare it with the way it's done here, this is much easier to read than this. Don't do calligraphy in all caps. You're not used to seeing this kind of character, an L next to an I next to a G. It's very, very confusing. Your eye is not used to that. So don't do words in all caps. It's confusing. Do them in upper and lowercase. Now, if you insist on doing caps together, then make it be a monogram. Here's an example of my three initials where I've put the B in the middle and the K and the W on either side, and then you end up with a nice combination of letters that can be all caps, but stay away from it in words. It reads much, much better if you use upper and lowercase together. Numbers. If you know calligraphy, upper and lowercase, then you've got to know how to address an envelope or whatever, so let's do a couple of numbers here. All I'm doing is forming these in the same combinations of different strokes. I don't have them broken down where you can see each and every one, but by the time you get to numbers, if you've practiced on the alphabet, upper and lowercase, then it'll be very obvious how these are done. But I'll form the letters and show you that it's really very, very easy. Now these are done with 5 pin widths high, and I may be making them a little bit differently than the examples, but you'll see how you can change them up a tad. Now on the Old English style, you really can't, they all have to be vertical. You can't lean them to the right as you do the cursive. And this will give you an idea of how they can all go together. Okay, if you're doing an address, you may want to make your pin width 5. And let's say that your address would start right here. That would give you the relationship of the 5 pin width number to the 7 or 8 pin width uppercase letter. Or you may choose to make your numbers the same width, or same height rather, as your uppercase letters. That's a choice that you can make. Whichever is most appealing to you, you can do it. Just be sure that you mark off your pin widths, set your guidelines so that you're consistent with whatever you do. Punctuation. Here is what the Old English punctuation looks like. It really can go along with most any style. The main difference being that the dollar sign, rather than being like this, which you might have for a cursive, you use the Old English S. So just take a look at those. You can see how they're formed. They fit right in very nicely with all the rest of the Old English characters. Spacing. Have to know how to do spacing. Even if you do the best calligraphy in the world, if you can't get the letters attractively joined and the proper space between words, then you really haven't accomplished much. Let me show you quickly what you should look for. The widest space should be where you have 2 vertical characters together. That's the widest space. The normal space would be between a vertical and a curved, and the narrowest would be between 2 curved units, or as an example, like between the P and the O, between the O's, between the O and the D, and so forth. So the word poodle is a good example. Here's the widest, here would be the normal. When you space the letters, don't try to give a mechanical spacing to each one. If you say, I'm going to give each letter ½ inch, this is what it'll look like. Obviously, this is much more attractive. You want to not do this, but form the letters using this rule in mind. It will make your letters flow much, much better, and I think you'll see that it's not that difficult once you've done it. You'll learn to gauge your eye for it, and if you make a letter that's too far apart from the previous one, then it'll register. And the next time you do it, if you're practicing, then squeeze it in a little bit. Here are some flourishes. These are ways that you can make some changes and additions to the letters. They're letters that lend themselves to a separate little stroke here and there. Let me make one for you. Instead of making the A like this, like we learned earlier, if you have room at the end of a line of poetry or something, you may want to give it that. You can do the same thing on the D. Frequently, I'll end a line with an E, and then I'll give it that if I have the space. You can see that you can do it with a K. You can also give a nice flourish with the M. You You can come over here on the N and the P, the R. There may be others. You may find that there are other characters where you can do a similar thing or even make it quite different. Making it all happen. Once you learn how to make the letters and how you form the pieces and all, once you're beginning then to do a piece of work, here's a good suggestion. Letter your word or your phrase or your sentence or whatever on a piece of tracing paper and then position those lines until you get them just where you want them. Then come over here and make a little mark on your board that you've already established your letter height for, and then go ahead and begin your lettering. This will help you center and get everything just like you want it. By the way, this little phrase here, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, is a very, very effective way of practicing because it contains each and every letter in the alphabet. So remember that, get it down on paper, do that phrase over and over and over. It'll teach you how to space, it'll teach you the relationship of upper and lower case, and you'll learn very quickly. I'd like to make a special invitation to you. First of all, there is a book. I have a couple of books, but there is one book here that really is tied to what I've just shown you. The Old English guide that I authored a couple of years ago is excellent. It has a breakdown of all the letters and strokes. You can go right through and find that it's easy to develop the letters because you have all the guidelines there. Another thing that we've just begun is a newsletter. It's called Brown Lines. I'd love to have you see a sample of it. I'd like to hear from you. If you're interested in writing to me, sending me a sample of your work, write to me, let me hear from you. I'll be glad to give you a critique, give you some help if you have any particular needs, and I really would like to hear from you. Let me know if you're interested in the guideliner, the book, the template, the newsletter, or whatever. Most of all, the most important thought I can leave with you is to practice every day. Don't get discouraged, and I think you'll be amazed at how quickly you'll learn. Thank you. Let me hear from you.